Steps into it, pass is caught! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
Hello, let's go. It's your man Flip, and thank you for spending 15 minutes with me today. We're sitting here in the week after the NFL draft with 25 new Vikings to go over. So let's get on to it. The draft started with some very interesting picks concerning the Vikings and their rivals. It all began when the Packers selected a cornerback, a position of need for Minnesota. Jair Alexander went to them at pick 18. Then another coveted prospect who many of us thought would solve the Vikings' offensive line issues goes to Detroit. At pick 18, Frank Ragnow becomes the second interior lineman to come off the board, but he was just the start of a big offensive lineman run. Center Billy Trice will be driving from his alma mater in Columbus to Cincinnati, who took him 21st overall. 2 picks later, New England replaced Nate Solder with Georgia lineman Isaiah Wynn. Wynn, Price, Ragnow, and Quentin Nelson made for 4 interior linemen in the first round. That's only happened one other time in the last 20 plus years. For Vikings fans, the draft was going great until the big guys all started getting taken. By the time the Vikings were on the clock, cornerbacks Josh Jackson and Mike Hughes were still on the board. So were linemen Will Hernandez, James Daniels, Connor Williams, and Austin Corbett. Quarterbacks Lamar Jackson and Mason Rudolph remained available, giving Minnesota the chance to trade down. With all those options, the Vikings did exactly what I thought they would do if they didn't trade down. They drafted cornerback Mike Hughes from the University of Central Florida. Like we talked about pre-draft, we gotta read the tea leaves. Minnesota didn't pursue a free agent corner or re-sign Terrence Newman. They interviewed Hughes at the Combine. They were at his pro day. They brought him in for a top 30 visit. So even if you're comparing him to Josh Jackson, we gotta ask, who did they know better? Who did they feel more comfortable drafting? Hughes was the clear answer. On top of that, we know Rick shies away from drafting interior linemen early and loves the 5th-year option that accompanies first-round picks. Hughes was the clear answer. Now, I'm not a scout, guys. I don't have my own opinion on what Hughes does well or how he'll fit in, how long he'll take to develop, anything like that. I just know he was very, very high on Rick and Zim's board, and given their recent track record, you gotta trust this pick. For them to be so in on Mike Hughes is a huge vote of confidence in itself. Outside of that, multiple different draft resources break down Hughes. After reading them all, you see tremendous upside and a golden opportunity for him to grow while surrounded by a deep, talented secondary. They're all gonna ball and compete. His selection actually makes me want to bring Newman back more, and they did. What a secondary we have, and what a mentor Newman will be in his final year. This first pick looks like an A+ right now. As good as the first round treated Minnesota, they still needed a guard or tackle. It became pretty apparent early on that the quality starter they sought would be a lot harder to find than we hoped for. 4 of the first 7 picks in round 2 were interior linemen. With Corbett, Hernandez, Daniels, and even Braden Smith off the board, Connor Williams was the only target still available. The choice was clear: trade up or miss out. The Vikings stood pat at 64, and Williams went to the Cowboys 12 picks earlier. The Vikings ended up taking Brian O'Neill at their slot in the 2nd round. He's a Pittsburgh tackle who has some experience at tight end and also was incorporated into some trick plays in that Pitt offense. O'Neill was number 72 on Arif's consensus big board. JR had him at 100. This isn't that big of a reach, but offensive lineman coach Steve Spagnuolo has a project on his hands. The O'Neill pick is a B- right now. He'll have to bulk up and improve his technique to prove that waiting for offensive line was the right call. Now, what I want to talk about here is, should they have traded up? To trade up above Dallas per Rich Hill's new draft value chart, they could have traded their second and third round picks for number 49 while getting back a sixth rounder. That's a pretty steep price. The actual trades had much similar prices. The Eagles traded their second and their fifth rounder to move up 3 spots to number 49. The Chiefs traded their second and third rounder for number 46 and a fifth. The 49ers trade to 44 and the Lions trade to 43 meet the same value. The Titans number 41 too. That's 5 trades that confirm it would have taken both Minnesota day 2 picks to get Connor Williams. I can't decide if it would have been worth it. My gut says yes, but then you're looking at no picks at all in rounds 3 and 4. Regardless, the early offensive line run caught us flat-footed. 8 interior linemen in the first 50 picks is crazy. That's the most since the merger in 1970. Yet the drop-off to O'Neal isn't that big. The Vikings will find their starter through an open competition. O'Neal ended up being the only new Viking on day 2. They traded out of the third round, which I found sensible since most of their targets were now off the board. No defensive tackle Nathan Shepard or edge Kamoko Toure. Not even tight end Jordan Akins lasted. Justin Reed and Ronnie Harrison were there, but they had already addressed the secondary with Hughes. So that pretty much ended the draft in terms of players Minnesota had overtly targeted this spring. They were able to sign several undrafted free agents they had history with, but we'll get to that later. For now, we're talking about day 3, starting with Jalen Holmes. I love this pick from a positional standpoint. The Ohio State grad projects as a rotational piece along the defensive line. This team desperately needs more fresh bodies in the trenches. Some would call the former Buckeye a tweener, stuck between the speed needed for end and the strength needed for tackle. But tweener is an outdated term. Flexibility to play both roles is a major strength. We hope that Holmes develops into the role Brian Robeson currently plays as a veteran enters his last year on his contract. Strong move here by Spielman. I was feeling pretty good at this point in the draft. Minnesota filled cornerback, offensive line, and defensive line in the order I had hoped for. It was a restoration of some excitement after a debatable Thursday and Friday. Basically 5 picks to go with most needs filled. That's exactly how Rick acted. The Vikings started spending draft capital to trade up and get their guys. First, they put a purple jersey on yet another day 3 tight end, Tyler Conklin. Conklin has some great highlight reel catches, but most cite his inconsistency as a pass catcher and a foot injury that really hurt him in 2017. He's not the pass catching threat that a lot of Vikings fans were hoping for yet. Then they traded up and drafted a kicker. I just don't get it, guys. Y'all know me. I try to stay optimistic, but I just don't get this one. I guess the good news is that if you're going to take a kicker, it might as well be Dan Carlson. If you're going to trade up for a kicker, it might as well be Daniel Carlson. The kid was the SEC's leading scorer and has more than 3 years of kicking experience for Auburn. He made 90% of his field goals under 39 yards and 62% of his kicks longer than 50. If you want to compare that to Kai Forbath, Kai hit 91% of his field goals under 40 yards, 87% of his extra points, and 67% of his 50-plus kicks. So this Carlson guy is basically Kai Forbath. Maybe he's cheaper. If you like kicker competitions in camp, there's good news for you. You're gonna have one in Minnesota this year. Saw another change in strategy at the start of round 6. The developmental prospects added this year are all big on physical traits. Appalachian State lineman Colby Gossett has experience at both tackle and guard, and he's NFL ready in terms of size and strength. He enters an interesting offensive line group between Tom Compton, O'Neal, Danny Isidora, and Colby Gossett. The Vikings need to find just one starter. Most fans don't think there's a clear answer there, but maybe all that competition will get the job done. Edge rusher Ade Aruna transformed into a legitimate pass rusher for Tulane over the past 3 years. He's got a really fun mock draftable chart comparing to Jadeveon Clowney, Bradley Chubb, and Adalius Thomas, to name a few. A 4.6 40 for someone who weighs 262 pounds is ridiculous. Linebacker Devontae Downs has the size and speed to develop into a rangy downhill linebacker. There's a clear path to the roster for him if he has a solid camp. And that kind of highlights the lack of depth at linebacker. There's Kentrell Brothers and his 4-game suspension, Eric Wilson there behind Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, and Ben Gideon. Is that enough? After round 7, we're still questioning whether we trust in our third running back and third tight end. We need to see our backup linebackers flash in the preseason and improvement along the offensive line. But thankfully, we have great defensive line and secondary groups. The wide receivers look very solid, so do the quarterbacks. There is enough to believe in this roster, especially after the great 2017 and when you compare it to rosters around the NFL. There is enough to believe Mike Zimmer has all the toys he needs to contend in 2018. Was over, but this pod isn't, and neither were the Vikings, who got very aggressive signing undrafted free agents. As I hinted at before, multiple prospects who met with Minnesota decided to sign with our purple after the draft. You think those new training facilities had anything to do with that? Jeff Badet, Houghton Hill, Hercules Mataafa, Rock Thomas, and Jake Winicky stand out to me. Badet tested well at the combine, even though he didn't deliver the production you would expect at Oklahoma. Houghton Hill had a badass college career down in Austin, Texas, outside of his 2017 suspension. Hill's a fun one for me because I got to see both Hill and another undrafted free agent, Armonte Foreman, play in person on multiple occasions. So it'll be awesome to see Hill work through the issues that forced him to go undrafted and see what his NFL career has in store. A lot of fans are excited about Hercules, the Washington State edge who lacks size but makes up for it with his speed, elite production, and motor. Can he bulk up and win his way into the defensive line rotation, or do they convert him to linebacker? Can Rock Thomas make good on his Auburn pedigree, even though he finished his career at Jacksonville State? If you're wondering on Thomas, his departure from the SEC was due to injury concerns and a lack of playing time. He's still talented enough to become a change of pace back in the NFL. Thomas factors into both the running and passing game. Then there is a receiver, Jake Winicky from Maple Grove, who went to South Dakota State and will be a crowd favorite in camp. Are all these guys going to make the roster? Of course not, but we don't need to start all that yet. These rookies just got drafted and signed. They're all in purple right now, and they're all dreaming. I'm talking big dreams. Let's see which dreams come true. That's it, guys. Thanks for listening. Time to shut it down.